Hello, and welcome to the RPG Rundown. I'm Seth.
And I'm Jeff from Dungeons to Deep Space. We've got the systems and the stories for your table. Today we're diving into the art of world building. But we're not just talking theory, we're going to give real tools on how to make it happen. So today we have 7 essential tool categories covering everything from random tables to organizational tools, map creators, and much more.
Yeah, whether you're fleshing out cultures or you're crafting cities, these tools will help you bring every part of your world to life. So we're going to jump in, and we're going to start with kind of the most obvious, but also sometimes the most overlooked. Mm-hmm. And that is whatever system you're running, the core rules will often have tools for world building. And it could be included in a core rule book if it's just one book, or it could have something like a DM's guide, like D&D does, or Game Master's guide of some kind. I have one here for Tales of the Valiant, which if you are a fan of the show, you know that we are a fan of Tales of the Valiant, and it is another 5e system. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, these books, whether you have them in physical form or digital form, will have amazing tools for creating it. And especially the more recent that you have, whether it's for 5e or for Genesis or some other system, like Daggerheart, DC-20. I know all of these are coming with or already include amazing tools for world building.
Right.
But yeah, like they have rules in here for how to do that. They have suggestions and all sorts of things. But this is, like I said, most often overlooked because when we talk about world building, a lot of times we're thinking homebrew, right? Homebrew worlds. Right. And it's like, oh, well, we don't want to use the tools that they've given us because that's not
that feels like cheating.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I mean, that is something that is very easy to use.
Right.
And in fact, like I said, the Tales of the Valiant one, I already have because I backed it on Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. The new 2024 DM's guide from Wizards of the Coast is coming out, I believe, this month in November. Mm-hmm. At least to some people. I'm not sure who. But I hear on some of the other podcasts I listen to that it's supposed to be coming out soon. Okay. And I know that they've increased the tools for world building in that.
Right.
So yeah, it's again, whatever core rules for your system you're using, hopefully they should include that.
Right. We'll have something of the sort for sure.
But that's an obvious one. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a tool. Now, this is the next one we're going to do. It's a tool, but it's also kind of maybe part inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's one of the big things with world building is a lot of times you need some inspiration. And so I'm one that as I'm kind of building out a world or building out something that I'm creating, I love to take ideas of things that I love and kind of mush them all together into something creative and unique. And so the idea here is like taking different books or movies or genres or anything else that you've seen or watched or enjoyed and bringing those ideas and making them your own. Not stealing, not directly copying, but how can you bring them together? So an example of that would be in my own world that I've built. It's called Maradonia. It is based on the early American frontier or the Wild Wild West. And so in my brain, as I was like thinking through it, I was like, what if there was magic and sorcery and all of this, and like your fantastical D&D elements in the Wild West at like the the boom of civilization. Like, what would that look like? And so that's really kind of what my own world was based off of. That was the inspiration for it at the very beginning. And as I was building that out, I was taking ideas and concepts from like some of my favorite westerns that I grew up watching. Now, I did try to make, as I built my world out, that it was not so overly western. Like, not everyone's riding around on cowboys with six shooters and cowboy hats, right?
Yeah.
But in my idea, it was kind of taking after that early American frontier with your good guys and your outlaws and your train robberies and all of these things. And I don't know. For me, I love to have at least a good amount of inspiration as a starting point. It just helps me build from that point on.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
like it's something that we all, I feel like, take inspiration from. What, right?
Hmm.
I mean, like thinking of the big inspirations that we as tabletop gamers use, right? Lord of the Rings,
Hmm.
Star Wars. They're the man. Like, there's so many
Hmm.
great books and TV shows and movies out there, and when we talk about using them as inspiration, you can absolutely use a world from Star Wars as a setting,
Right. Yeah.
or you could use maybe a town from Lord of the Rings as an inspiration. Now,
Hmm.
again, that's why we say don't steal it,
Right.
unless you're playing a Lord of the Rings RPG, and
Right.
then by all means use the resources that you have.
Right.
But if you are creating a world and you want it to be a Lord of the Rings-esque fantasy
Hmm.
with elves and dwarves and orcs and goblins, then maybe take the imagery, the mental imagery of what does the inn look like,
Hmm.
what does who are the NPCs that frequent the tavern, what about the guards at the gate, use those as inspiration,
Hmm.
describe them in kind of how you see them, because, like, let's be honest, all of the ideas that we have are rooted or inspired by something, probably, like,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
uh,
Very
Everything, it's like,
true.
oh, that's just taken from this, which is taken from this, which is inspired from this, and that's okay.
Right. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And I would say maybe like an asterisk here as well is like I'm saying, like, don't steal, don't copy. But if you're running a game for your friends and you're describing it out and they go, wait, are we on Tatooine? Like, I just think that would be fun. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying steal it and publish it or anything like that, but if you're running a game for your friends and you wanted to put them in some spectacular place that you know that they're eventually going to recognize, I think that's just fun. And I think that would be a cool idea for your group of friends.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, you could, choosing a setting, right, is a lot of times we get inspired by one of these things that we have experienced, a book, a movie, a TV show.
Sure, yeah.
Like, oh man, I would love to make a campaign in a setting like, like a Marvel TV
Hunger
show,
Games.
or Hunger Games,
Yeah.
or this book that I read, where there's, from Brandon Sanderson, kind
Hmm.
of thing.
Right.
Shout out to Stormlight Archive and the fact that the Cosmere RPG is coming out.
Right. It's
So
here.
there's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But say you want to do something, like that, or you want to do something, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a show, Halo,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Whatever it is.
Right. Like,
Um,
or just start with like just two polar opposite things. Like, what if you started with Star Wars and Harry Potter, and like, how could you bring that together into one unique world?
well, I mean, it's pretty easy considering Harry Potter is just Star
That's
Wars.
fair. Maybe
So.
not a great example. How could you bring the
No,
magic of
no, no,
Harry
no.
Potter, put
I
it in
just,
space?
I jest.
Oh, I've seen the same
Um,
video, and I went, wait a minute.
yeah,
Harry
that,
might just be Luke.
yeah, I
Okay.
think so. I think so.
Yeah.
If you know, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, but like I said, use inspiration, use everyday life, use things in the real world. I played a
Hmm.
game one time where, after a while, we realized, even though we were playing in this fantasy setting, we realized we were in like an abandoned office building. And why did we realize that? because we found ourselves in a bathroom with stalls and toilet paper, as described by the DM. And we're like, what? Are we in a bathroom? You know, it's like,
Right.
so
That is awesome.
anyway,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You know, use use the things around you as inspiration. I mean, that's something that we would suggest.
Like
for sure.
imagine I remember doing this actually as a creative challenge in a writing class in like middle school. But we had to write a story that could take place in a refrigerator. And
Oh,
you just had me
fun.
thinking about that. It's like imagine writing a world that took place within your refrigerator. And your characters is playing as like ants that are trying to get food
Man,
back. Like I don't
that's
know, dream up
fantastic.
stuff. Like put yourself in the confines of like I have to make an adventure in a laundry room. Like and build from there. I
Yeah,
don't know. Might have went off the rails there, but that would be pretty cool to think through and
for
figure out how to
sure.
do that.
All right. Well, so number 3 of our world building category tools are that element of randomness, right? So random tables or random generators of some kind.
Right.
And these are things that are widely accepted by everyone in the TTRPG community. I say that it is widely accepted. I'm sure there's someone out there that's like, no,
No,
that's cheating.
random tables are terrible.
But absolutely, for the players at your table, 100% fine. There are books. I have this one right here. I know we've talked about it on the show
Still need to
before.
buy that book.
The
Yeah.
Game Master's Book of Astonishing Random Tables. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it says it's $25, but I'm pretty sure I picked it up for like 18 or something.
Yeah.
And it
No,
was like
absolutely worth it. Every book in that series is worth it.
yes, and it was like at Target. I mean, I have the one for traps, I have the one for dragons, and I have the one for NPCs. Love all of them, but this one specifically is fantastic for world building because it has so many random tables for cities, for organizations, for NPCs. Yeah, amazing. So this, there's obviously physical things you can use. There are also so many free online random tables. If you just did a search for, random table or, random table for D&D, whatever. And there's going to be a lot of people that have free resources for that. That I have used some in the past. A lot of them offer them for free. Sometimes you can, find paid versions, like if they have like books on like Drive-Through RPG or other stuff like that. And so there's plenty of really cool things to use for that. And however, and if you're watching the YouTube video, that's youtube.com/therpgrundownltn. We'll show you some of the things as we move forward, including, like I said, this book and other things. But yeah, one of the things that you can also do is there are generators, which are basically random tables, or but it's kind of doing the rolling for you. And so, like, one of the ones that I found a long time ago and had been using was fantasy name generators. You can find them. You can find them for specific things, like, oh, I need a fantasy name generator for elves, or I need a fantasy name generator for dwarves, or whatever, And so, like, one of the most common ones is fantasynamegenerators.com.
Right.
So, it's...
We've all been to that site.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have, for sure. For sure. But yeah, it's really cool. You can put it in there. Again, there's fantasy and folklore, real names, places and locations, all of these things that they have generators for. And so you can say, oh, like I said, I want to find a name for elves. They're, and they have this one specifically has a bunch of them. But again, it's most of them, however, for these random tables and generators, said for the random tables, you also kind of need a die, like whether it's a D20 or a D6, and you're going to roll a die, and you're going to come up with two names or one name or an idea from one of those random tables. And if you don't consider yourself a creative, or you have a hard time imagining it, this is where we start to get into the tools to help you come up with that.
Right. Yeah.
What's another one that we have here?
So a big one that I really love is Fantasy Town Generator, and it is exactly what it says. It's literally fantasytowngenerator.com. You can go there, create a free account. You can hit new settlement, give it a name, choose the size. You can have a hamlet that's 100 people all the way up to a big city that's 25,000 people. You can choose their lifestyle. You can choose whether it's coastal, rivers, forest, walled. Like, you can choose all of these things.
Yeah.
And then when you actually like create it, it'll generate it up. It'll generate a map. Now, granted, the map is ugly. The map is not for anyone but you. But there's like buildings there, and then you can go and click on the building, and you can choose the time of day, and it's going to tell you who's in that building, what kind of shop is it, what's the inventory at that shop. Then you can go in and you can add your own inventory, you can add your own shopkeepers, you can edit all that, and then when you're playing, this is literally what I do. When you're playing, you just have that map open and they're like, oh, I'm walking around. And I'm like, yeah, to your left is the blacksmith. And I'm looking at my map and I'm like, that means to the right is the magic shop. Oh, you go in the magic shop, there's Balwee's Light Dust. I literally have it open right here. And it's all there. I can click on the shop's inventory. I can check the prices, and it's all, I have pretty much all the cities in my world. I take that back. At least all the cities my players have adventured in my world have been generated in Fantasy Town Generator, and then I've added in my own NPCs and the things that I want to be there.
Nice.
But it is just such a cool tool. And if you're like me and you really struggle when your characters like decide to go search the random alley that you didn't plan on anyone going down, and you're like, oh, I suddenly need something interesting to happen here.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a good tool to help you come up with some sort of ideas. It's not going to give you all the answers, but it'll give you a few NPCs and a little bit of information about them, and you can roll with it from there.
And, a lot of these tools are to help you, but at the same time, if you have the creative mind to come up with some of this on your own, it's always going to feel better introducing it to your players, and it's always you're going to be more excited about it because you came up with it on your own. And that's not to discourage you from trying to do that. These are just tools, and again, like Jeff said, we find them very helpful when our players are like, oh, you know what? Like, I need to I'm just going to ask this random person on the street. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then like, well, what's your name? And I'm like, well, I don't have a name for random dwarf, on the street. And so I, going online and using a fantasy name generator or another tool that we will talk about later, is perfectly acceptable. And it's something that, when you're caught on the fly, it's much better to like try to have something and continue with the story rather than for them to wait for you to like come up with something or create something and kind of interrupt the session. So,
yeah. And one of the things I really like, again, I'm using Fantasy Town Generator, is, like you said, they talk to this random dwarf, and all I have to do is click on a building, find a random dwarf, and I can say, oh, you're now talking to Fromvor Greatsong, right? They have this conversation, but there's a notes section, so now I can go write in this NPC, in his notes, that they had a conversation about this on this day, and so if they're ever like, who was it I was talking to? I can go back and look at the notes for the NPC and find out what they actually talked to him about. If you're the type of DM that remembers to do stuff like that, that'd be great. I'm just talking hypothetically here.
Sure. And mix and match these tools, right? So, if you wanted to use Fantasy Town Generator and create a town, like a village of like 40 people, but you wanted them all to have like a theme to their name, maybe you go use a name generator or something online where you say, oh, I want all the dwarves to have, all their names to have something to do with, mushrooms or something.
Right.
And so then, you could go have something generate a bunch of names with mushroom names and then, replace the NPCs in Fantasy Town Generator.
Sure, absolutely, easily.
Whatever. Again, these are tools to enable you to more easily craft a fun and exciting world, not only for your players, but for you too. So
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So
Um, and,
I think that brings us to the next section.
yeah, the next section. Well, I'm going to let you lead into it,
Oh,
but
yes.
we like to be organized as we create our worlds,
Hmm.
and especially the more that you start to generate, the more you need to like try to keep it organized. So let's talk
Yes,
about some
absolutely.
organizational tools, Jeff.
Yeah, so organizational tools, and this, if you just get on Google and you type in world building tools, the bulk majority of things that are going to come up are going to be organizational tools. So there's journals, there's, world building specific tools. We have like World Anvil, Legend Keeper, and then of course there's like Obsidian, Notion, OneNote, Loop, like an absolute boatload.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to give my very detailed, very controversial opinion right now. The best one is the one that you actually know how to use.
100%.
Because
100%.
that's the one you're going to go back to. And that's why, like, over the years, I have tried so many, and I still always end up putting my notes back in Notion because I've been using Notion for so long.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
I use OneNote
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
have been using it for, oh my gosh. I mean, I've been using it in my personal life for 15 years.
Right.
I was a, early adopter back in the
Hmm.
day, and I absolutely loved it. And this was, before we had anything that was even remotely close
Right.
to, these online organizational tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, and it just, but yes, absolutely. The best one is the one that you know how to use and you use
Right.
it.
Yes,
Um,
and then you use it. That's the main thing, is getting that information down somewhere that you can find it and you can navigate it.
Absolutely. And a lot of these have, like, some of them have free versions,
Mhm.
especially the ones that are general organizational tools, like OneNote, like Notion, like Loop, which is basically kind of, if you don't know
It's
what the
no, it's
Loop
like
is,
Notion.
it's kind of like Microsoft's version of Notion. Like
Right. Yeah.
it's been out for about a year. It's pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, Also like Obsidian, like those are all organizational
Hmm.
tools, journaling tools. A lot of them you can use scripting and stuff, and they have premium versions, but they also you can use them for free generally.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the world building specific tools
Hmm.
may have a free tier,
Hmm.
but they all have a paid tier.
All of them
And
pay tier.
some of them even only really want you to use the paid tier.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean,
but
I would say most of them just want you to use the paid tier.
well, yeah, yeah,
But this is something that I would like some feedback on, because I, for one, have never, I have obviously created like a World Anvil account and like toyed around with it, went through some tutorials, but again, Notion is, I like you, I've been using Notion probably about 10 years now. And so
yeah,
just in personal life and everything. So it was so easy, but if you have a organizational tool that you love, that you enjoy, whether it's built just for TTRPG world building, or it's something more general like OneNote or Notion, let us know in the comments on YouTube, and let us know what you like and what you would recommend. Even if there's a paid tier that you would highly recommend, we would love to know, because I
yeah,
would truly love to get into using something very specific to world building, like World Anvil, Legend Keeper, or the various others like them.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I did use Legend Keeper for a while. I think I
Okay.
paid for it briefly. It's
Hmm.
pretty much like TTRPG specific Notion or Loop.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it uses like it's literally laid out just like it. The big thing that they offer is that they include a lot of tools that are kind of specific, and because they know, like, well, you know what, we want to do maps, and so we're gonna have maps, and here's a way to make them interactive. So they kind of, and it's not like you can't do that with Notion or with
Hmm.
Loop or with Obsidian, but they present it in a way that's a little easier to understand and figure out how to do.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, but it's very much like Notion in that regard.
Right.
World Anvil is very cool and is almost like creating a wiki for your
Hmm.
world, because you can also have it be outward facing. I think Legend Keeper has this as well, but
Hmm.
you can basically create wiki like articles and have interactive maps and stuff. But a lot of them have these things.
Right. Okay.
Lore Frog is one that I heard about a while back. It's a little simpler, but it's very cool, and it's like more notes structured. But one that I am using currently, so I'm using OneNote. However, I'm also using Alchemy RPG.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
And this brings me to another thing, is that part of the organizational tools could also be your virtual tabletop. Like a lot of virtual tabletops have some, the ability to craft worlds in them. And so Alchemy being the one that I'm using, you can write articles, you can have navigation, you can have maps and resources. So like I do that presently with, there's like content universes, and you can have created. And so, I can go into my world of Zenelia and show, I have articles on like the intro to Zenelia and what is the world kind of thing. So you can do all sorts of really cool things like that. But again,
that's a good point.
The best one.
I wasn't thinking about Alchemy and what all you could do in it too.
There's so much. It's fantastic.
That's true.
But again, the best one is definitely the one that you use.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, hey, let's move on to the next one here, shall we?
Let's do it.
The next one is kind of a fun one, and it's maps and map making tools. So,
and I think this is one of the areas that most people, there's a love-hate relationship here.
Oh,
Either
yeah, absolutely.
You love making maps and like the creative and the artsy side of it, or you hate it and you're trying to like not do it as long as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are really fun ways to generate a map for your world. You can do it like with pencil and paper. I saw this really cool way to do it one time. They basically took a giant piece of paper, like butcher paper or something, and they took really cool. Yes, and they took sand, like a handful of sand, and they basically like kind of just like tossed it out there, and then they basically used a Sharpie and they created outlines around the sand. Yeah. And they made big islands or continents with it, and then and just kind of used that as like as an analog way to randomly generate a map.
Yeah. So the one I watched, they did pretty much that, but they did it with a big bag of rice. And so
that was it. Actually, rice. Sorry, that's actually was not sand.
Rigid
you could do it with sand, but
you could.
Rice is a little easier to get.
Yeah. Well, so they did it like that with like rice, and it created all these unique environments. But then I think they took like a bag of like D6s and they threw them out there, and like everywhere, maybe it wasn't D6s, but they threw it out there, and everywhere one landed, they like drew around it, and that was like a city. And it just,
nice. Yeah.
So they went like all the way through.
Absolutely.
And it was so cool. I'm like, man, that'd be a lot of fun to do. Just sit down with like your players or something and do it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's like a in-person way to do it. You can also use real maps. You could use a cool map of, especially old maps. I love old maps.
Yeah.
But you could use real maps, and you could use it for your world. You could use it for a town or a dungeon. In fact, I saw one recently, and they took one of those mall kiosk maps to make to use it for a dungeon.
Right. That's pretty awesome.
And so they just created a dungeon out of like a mall kiosk map, right? So cool. Because, malls often are like weirdly shaped and
oh, yeah, for sure.
So have lots of little rooms and hallways. So yeah, that's fun.
Okay.
And then obviously there's tons of digital map tools out there. You can search for D&D map making tool, and you will find a good handful of them.
So many. Yep.
I would say a couple of the most popular, if you want just a simple one, is actually called Dungeon Scrawl.
Okay.
and it's very easy to use. You can go and you can actually just start creating without having to sign up for anything, and you can choose which kind of, which kind of. It basically makes it look like a pencil drawn or hand drawn, so it's gonna be like a single color page with walls, kind of thing. So this is probably a little bit more for battle maps, but yeah, you can basically just go, oh, I'm gonna make a room there, and a hallway, and another room. And there you go. There's a map, right? And so, like, obviously for like a battle map, that's really cool. I think you can definitely. I think there's a way to do like a big world as well. But yeah, absolutely very cool. Something easy to use. And it's called Dungeon Scrawl because it's good for making dungeons.
Right.
However, if you want to do like a world map, then Inkarnate, it's INK, ARNATE, in ink, like ink, in Inkarnate, is fantastic.
Yeah, Incarnate's great.
And you can, again, you can use these for free, or you can do a subscription for some. But there's so many really cool things that you can do. You can explore maps that they have. A lot of times they'll have maps you can download and use for free. Or you can.
One thing I liked about Incarnate is if you create your own map or if someone else has created one, you can allow people to copy it and customize it. And a lot of creators on Incarnate do that. They'll create a map and they'll allow it to be copied and edited. So you could look for a forest bridge and you'll find a map that someone else has already made, and then you can take it, add in the elements that you want or change it in the ways you want, and then export it, and you already have a ready-made map ready to go, which is great for those moments when you need a map quickly and don't exactly have the time to make it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, those are kind of a couple of the two. Like I said, again, there are so many of them. There's so many of them. But those are two of kind of the most popular for creating worlds and dungeons, and so highly recommend those.
Yep, agreed. And there's plenty. I'm trying to think of like any kind of map making tools that I've seen are specific for like world maps. Most of them that I'm familiar with are battle maps, kind of specific. I know Incarnate there is a whole like you can choose world map as the type of map you're making, and it gives you different elements and things you can use. I'm not sure of any other ones that are very specific to world maps though.
Yeah, there's another one.
I'm sure there's others, but
absolutely. I think you can do it in World Anvil, actually. The tool that we talked about earlier.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Wonder Draft. And there's actually kind of two sides to that one. There's Wonder Draft and Dungeon Draft.
Dungeon Draft. That's what I was thinking of.
But Wonder Draft is the world building.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I knew that there was one that was both, that they had like the battle map side and then the world map side. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonder Draft and Dungeon Draft.
And they are not subscription based. They are a one-time purchase, which is nice.
Which is very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it as well. So, it's something that you can get and use.
Yeah.
And it's got very similar tools. Like a lot of these have very similar tools.
Yeah.
For
and it looks like they actually, I'm just scrolling the website now. They have additional art packs that you can buy.
Yeah.
And like I'm looking at the pirate one right now, and they're very much in the style of like the Che Piku art.
Yeah.
And I really like that. It's a really, really cool look with your bold, like kind of hand drawn lines and kind of vibrant colors. It's really nice.
Yeah, and they have a lot of these will have like pathing tools and other stuff like that. But the big selling point on a lot of these is that they have art assets. So they have, fantasy buildings, and they have fantasy walls and trees and stuff like that. So, So yeah, but it's pretty. That's a good one too that I've looked at before.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I see. I have not used that one. I have used Incarnate, so I can recommend Incarnate.
yeah,
Uh, but I've heard
very
good things
similar.
about Wonder Draft and Dungeon Draft.
Yeah, and if you're watching the video, there's a demonstration of Wonder Draft, which again is probably not too different than Incarnate, but again, not you don't need the subscription if you just buy it.
Right.
So
And that is nice. That is nice.
yeah, absolutely. So number 6 for our resources, our tools, right? Something to use. What do we got, Jeff?
So number 6 is actually your own players. And so this is one of the things that is really fun when you're building a world is including your players. I know when I was first building Maradonia, like I wanted to build out my own world, and I was moving from actually I took my players through the Lost Mines of Phandelver, and then I was building my own world for them to play in. And I remember consulting with my players, like, what kind of character do you want to play? Where would your character be from? And actually, one of our friends, Reborn Crusader, he was building a character for it, and he's like, well, my character would be an elf that's kind of away from civilization. And so, like, with that in mind, I created this whole, like, island where the inhabitants were this kind of, like, native elven tribe that were, and it was just unique to them. And just, I kind of did that with all of my players at that time, and a lot of the ideas for the world and the different parts of the world came from my players, and we've kind of built it together. And even still, like, my world is like a year, 2 years old now, and
Yeah.
still I am adding things as my players are coming up with stuff. And I'm like, they're like, "Is this in the world?" I'm like, "It is now,"
Yeah,
and we work through it together. And I think like,
absolutely.
and I think sometimes we have to get through like a little bit of pride to do that, because I think sometimes when we create something, we're like, "No, this is ours. I don't want anyone else to touch it," but we're really kind of limiting what could be, because other people have some really cool ideas, and building something together like that is really fun.
Absolutely. It gives your players ownership
Sure.
over
Yeah.
the world. And so, you know, especially for playing a long campaign, you could be a year and a half down the road and maybe they're getting bored.
Hmm.
Obviously we don't want that to happen,
Right.
but maybe they're like, oh, like, or maybe you're starting to feel tired trying to come up with new things every week or every month or
Right.
whatever it is. It gives them ownership and gets them excited about it when they come up with something. I mean, we had a session where we found a dragon's hoard, right? And I used several tools from here. So I used a generator, actually a random table from the book
Hmm.
over here,
Okay.
to find some loot for this dragon horde. And one of the pieces of loot was a like, oh man, it was like a 5 foot by 12 foot painting.
Okay.
And it was like, oh yes, it's a very handsome woman with a red dress and dark hair and piercing eyes, but it's like
Hmm.
massive. It's like it's like 5 foot by 12 foot, and in this like very gilded frame with rubies and emeralds all over it, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Right.
And so one of the players, which I honestly don't know if any of them listen to our show, but one of the players, he always talks about his mother, and it's again using books and movies as inspiration.
Hmm.
He has there's an old movie called Mystery Men with
Okay.
Ben Stiller. It's a superhero movie, but there's a
Oh, okay.
character in it who always has a wise and mysterious saying, but it never makes sense. It
Okay.
never makes sense. It's like, what goes up must come down, or it makes sense, but it's like, it doesn't make sense in the moment.
Right. Okay.
Um, and so
Yeah. That's awesome.
it's just kind of funny, nonsensical stuff. And so he is doing that, but he's doing it with, well, my mother said, and then he would give this like wisdom that his mother had imparted on him because he's this young cleric going out into the world. And he's like, well, my mother said. And so it's become this really funny shtick that he does.
Right.
Well, he, at one point, and the more you involve your players, the more comfortable they are getting involved with world building.
Right.
Whether it's for their backstory or whether it's for something going on in the narrative or in the world, and so he messaged me and was like, what if this picture, this painting, what if it was like a painting of my mother, my character's mother?
Right.
And I'm like, why is this but he doesn't know why.
Right. Yeah.
And so
that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a big mystery. And so he's very protective of the painting, and the others kind of have caught on that he's protective of it, but they don't know why. I won't reveal why or some other things that we have come up with together about that painting / and his mom and why it was in the Dragon Horde.
Right.
I'll leave secrets out there, but oh man, I can't wait for that to be revealed.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. And that's creating fun stuff like that with your players is awesome. I mean, I don't know. I even I probably break my game at times because whenever I realize my characters are having fun or my players are having fun doing something, I like to homebrew in a little bit of fun. Like I was playing one of our first campaigns. I'd introduced myself and Reborn, who I mentioned earlier, had introduced basically our entire families to D&D, and we got this started. And one of the things that my players like to do is Reborn's wife was playing a halfling rogue, and she loved to jump off the Dragonborn's back and attack stuff. And so naturally,
Awesome.
I just start giving her bonuses for that. Like every time you do that, you do gravitational damage as you're falling on. I called it something better than that, but I just love to when I find that my players are having fun with something, I like to incentivize fun. And
Nice.
so I think when you bring them into the fun, when you bring them into the creation, they enjoy it more.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, use them as a tool or resource for your world building, right? For example, and again, that's for, RP a little bit, but also for world building. My elf in my current campaign is, I had created this custom background for elves, and I created 4 very distinct nations of elves in my setting. And so he's from one with a special background. And one of the things about it is that his homeland was overrun when he was very young, and so he is kind of a wandering elf. He doesn't have a homeland, and so some of our adventuring is taking us closer to his homeland. I was like, hey, they're kind of expressing interest in trying to go to your homeland and find out what's going on. So I'm going to need your help to kind of world build this.
Right. Yeah.
And so he's all about it. He's excited, and so it's a lot of fun. But yeah, anything else about our players that we should?
I mean, I could probably go through story after story as to where as I'm thinking about it now that I've involved my players in even the world building of my own world right now. Like right now, the campaign I'm running is technically 50 years in the past, and my players have no idea why that's important yet. I don't think any of them watch this show, but still won't share it here. But one of my players, his powers come from a very unique thing, and he sends me a whole background list of this group called the Chrysanthas Embalmers and how he got his powers and kind of what they do. And I'm like, that's amazing. And I said nothing else until 15 sessions later.
That's awesome.
It all starts to come to a head, and I've actually incorporated that into my world and some of the stuff that really no one else is at least in my current campaigns. No one else has explored in current time because this one's still in the past.
Sure.
But I've actually started adding details and stuff like that lore that was kind of built by this player for his character. I've incorporated it as worldwide lore, just no one has actually played into just yet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So again, utilize your players as
Absolutely.
helping build the world. It'll help you as the DM tremendously. Okay, so we had our first 6 tools. We had DM's guide, we had books, movies, and stuff for inspiration. We have random tables and generators, organizational tools, maps and map making tools, and your players. And then the last one we're going to talk about is controversial at best. And that's going to be AI. And before you get upset and start typing that nasty comment in YouTube about AI, hear us out here, okay? First, both Jeff and I work in industries that are already utilizing AI. So we're familiar with it. We have seen the benefit of it some in those other industries, and have used some AI, in our daily life for some things. Now, we're not necessarily going to have the big discussion on ethical AI stuff. We'll touch on it briefly, but like I understand in like the TTRPG community and space, the big ethical dilemma is usually centered around art, or even could be someone's stories or something. But if you're sitting, there at a table with your friends, or you're doing it online, and somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, we're in this town, and I'm just going to grab the nearest person walking down the street," right? You can absolutely use random tables to try to create an NPC. However, you can also use an AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever Google's is called, Gemini, I think. You can absolutely use stuff like that to say, "Oh, give me a dwarf name," and you can have it, spit something out, and is that regurgitating things that it's found on the internet? Probably.
I would argue most of the information we put into our games we also found on the internet. So
right, and a lot of the things that we've talked about on these using these tools, that all of these other tools are widely accepted by the TTRPG community. Random tables, fantasy name generator, maps and stuff like that. Like a lot of these things are widely accepted, and again, like you said, finding things on the internet. Now, obviously, there's a big difference in using this for personal use. If you want to find something for your home game, absolutely. There's a big difference between that and then trying to use AI to generate stuff that you want to sell or make money off of. Right. And I think that's where the big ethical dilemma comes in at. Because the fear is that companies are going to use AI for art or video or voices, and those are all real fears, and I totally understand it.
Sure, because that's putting a lot of creatives out of work.
Sure,
because essentially when the companies stop
or
when they can just use
it could. That's the fear. I don't know that we've seen it a whole lot yet, but I think it could very well be coming.
It could, absolutely,
in some form or fashion. I think there's also a way for creatives to utilize AI in their own work or somehow. And we'll talk about that in a second. But again, if this is for personal use and you're hanging out, it's a quick and easy way to do it. To find a random name generator, to find a description of something. Because here's the thing too, and this is another thing. Like I use the internet all the time. Search engines, which a lot of AI is just better search engines. Let's be honest. It's just a better search engine. If you're not if you're not generating things, it's really just finding things and giving you the results a little better.
Right.
Like finding it, ask it for a description of an old ship.
Sure.
That's not, that's not something where it's like stealing information from anyone. I mean, I could go to thesaurus.com or pull out a physical thesaurus and try to look at alternate words for, the ocean.
Right. Yeah.
But, if you're in the flow of a game
Mm-hmm.
in the session and you don't have, like a random table or generator bookmarked that you want to use, you can absolutely use that.
Right.
It's, like I said, there's a lot of podcasts and videos out there about that say, these things are so horrible. And again, I am not talking about the ethical part of it here. I'm just talking about it as a tool for searching the internet, trying to find things. Don't feel bad about using it in these instances. And again, we're not talking about even selling it or making money or anything like that. So now, all of that said, I recently saw one specific for TTRPGs that I'm very curious about because its claim is that it is an ethical AI for TTRPGs, and it pays creators and artists for using their art. It is called Mythweaver.
Right.
And I have not dove into it yet, but I've read the internet, I've read the about section, and it's a very interesting concept, and I'm really curious to see where it goes. Because I feel like something like this is going to have to be how creatives in the industry start to use AI and still use their work and still make money. So this example, they're talking about how they're supporting artists, and they're building a new AI and artist ecosystem is what they claim. And the whole ecosystem is that artists are paid a commission for their art or data, I guess, if you are, have some cool story or something. It's put into Mythweaver, and then it's refined and upload commissioned artwork to Mythweaver. And then when the users try to generate an image, if their art is used to generate the image, they are paid a royalty per model generated. I'm sure it's probably pennies on the dollar.
Sure.
But if they're paid an initial commission and then they're paid a royalty, so that every time it's used in the generation of this, that sounds pretty awesome. I mean, as a model, again, I don't know in practice how well it works. Sure, I don't know if it's comparable. No, we've not used it to this point. But I think they're trying to do what they're trying to solve the problem that many people have with AI in the creative space. And so I look forward to watching how this develops. And they, said they are licensing the training data from those artists. That's why they're paying them commissions, paying them royalties. And so yeah, I think it's really cool. But here's another thing that I would say, moving away from the creative side of AI. Again, I work in an industry that is already using AI for certain things, but it's not generative. It's more, kind of like we talk about a lot of AI is just better search. It's more of the organizational kind of. And so one of the things, again, that Mythweaver is suggesting is something that some of these other AIs have. Copilot, for example, has it. I know other, what's the word? Zoom has it as well. Where basically if you are recording a meeting, that you can have an AI generated, you can have it auto-record and transcribe your meeting, and then you can have AI generate notes or a summary for that meeting.
Right.
It's a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
Not always perfect, and that's one of the things that we tell people is that, like, hey, if you're going to use one of these tools, make sure you're giving it the once-over as a human.
Right.
Because it's not always perfect.
Right.
And that's fine. But this Mythweaver is also offering that, where you can, even for their base level, which is monthly, $5 a month,
Which is really
you
not
can
bad at all.
record your session audio and get an AI summary of your session. That alone, without
Right.
any generative stuff, to me, is awesome, because
Sure.
I love Discord and I record a lot of my audio from Discord. But if I could record the audio in session and have a transcription and have the session be summarized, I think it would be tremendously helpful for continuing to build the world as you go,
Right.
along with the players, because then they also have the access to the recording, I guess, if you're giving it to them. And it'll help you as a DM prepare for the next session. So
Right.
I think there's something to be said for that part of it, especially. So
Yeah. That alone, like I would probably pay the $5 a month just for the recorded sessions
yeah,
and like the transcription. But I mean, really, as I'm just kind of looking through the website here, it kind of looks like they're almost wanting to be a one-stop shop, where this is where, as the DM, you can also create your sessions and create your campaigns and put in your world elements and things of that sort as well. So I mean, again, I have
absolutely.
not downloaded it really today. When you sent it to me a couple weeks ago was the first time I really looked at it, and this is about the second time I've looked at it.
I
And
agree.
so I can't say whether it's great or it's horrible, but it looks pretty good just looking at the
Yeah,
page now.
absolutely. And again, we wanted to highlight. Yeah, again, we're not endorsing
Hmm.
using AI, generative AI, to replace paid work
Right.
for entertainment.
Hmm.
Whether that's artwork. I mean, hand drawn or human made artwork is always going to be better,
Hmm.
hands down.
Right.
Whether that's art or film or video, I think a lot of those AI companies are trying to match it,
Hmm.
and who knows where it's going to be. I
Yeah.
think it's only going to get better,
Hmm.
but I think that tools like this, again, this is just us giving you the tools, saying, hey, this is something that you can absolutely use. So we're going to stop the AI discussion there. And if you made
Yeah.
it
Fair
through,
enough.
thank you for bearing with us. Again, I hope you understand we're not endorsing, stealing art from people and costing people their livelihoods. We absolutely are big proponents of, human-made creations. But
Hmm.
again, we're talking about tools for you building your world for your home campaign to make it what you want. So,
Right.
yeah. Anything else, Jeff, that you have to say on any of those 7 tools?
I don't think so. I think maybe just for world building in general. Um, I would just say, like, if anyone's hesitating to build a world, because I think I went back and forth on it for a while before I kind of decided to actually dive in and start building. And my biggest suggestion is just start building something,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, you can start small, you can start big, start with one town, start with one idea, but just start and then allow, like, once you get the ball rolling, it gets a whole lot easier. Like, I really hate like the sitting there staring at the blank piece of paper trying to think up something. And
Yeah.
that's why I really loved like the inspiration we talked about, like grabbing inspiration from somewhere, and starting to build from that point, because at least you're starting with momentum and you're not just starting from nothing. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and again, start small.
Hmm.
Start with a town. Start with a tavern,
Hmm. Oh yeah.
and get going. Why is it's a common trope in TTRPGs that your quest is going to start in a tavern,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
You meet in a tavern. Absolutely.
You meet in a tavern. It's 100%.
Hmm.
I did forget one thing actually, and I want to show it on the video and talk about it for a second, because it's on the organizational tools, okay?
Okay.
But there are also things you can use that are a lot of them are free out there, but it is like a world building worksheet. You can definitely, like, there's some out here. I'm showing one on screen that's from the Genesis system from Fantasy Flight Games, which is kind of their agnostic world building system. And there's worksheets out there, so you can like, people make these all the time. Like, there's a lot of third-party ones you can find, but it'll be like, oh, what's the world? What's the base setting? What's the genre? It'll ask questions about, like, what tropes or themes about technology or human nature or morality. What are the major factions? Stuff like that. And so you can go through a worksheet like this and create your world really, really easily. And again, that's kind of the kind of thing. There's another one here that is for kind of 5e, but it's like, planning a homebrew setting. Is there something threatening, kind of thing. And then there'll be, like, questions every so many pages, like, what level of world building do you like to do? Tell us about important places. So again, it's just a guide to help you create it, to help you be creative. And that's what these tools are. They are tools to help you be creative, because much like the organizational tools, the best world building that you'll do is the world you actually build.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The one you actually do is going to be the best one. So go out there, create a cool world. We'd love to hear about the worlds that you created. If you want to hit us up on social media, on X, on Instagram, in the YouTube comments, by all means, let us know. So, Jeff, tell us about Love Thy Nerd.
Yeah, so we are affiliated with Love Thy Nerd. We are part of the Love Thy Nerd podcast network. Love Thy Nerd is huge. Like, we have a ton of different podcasts, everything from, like, wrestling to a day in nerd history and, everything in between. Love Thy Nerd, the podcast network, we have now all split off to our own individual channels to make it easier for you to find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for TTRPG stuff, well, you found the right place. If you're looking for wrestling or the others, or tabletop games, things like that, we have podcasts for that on their own channels. So make sure you check that out. Love Thy Nerd exists to show the love of Christ to nerds and nerd culture. We are nerds and we are loved by Jesus. And that's what we're here for. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and definitely check them out. You can also go to lovethynerd.com. You can find our podcast there along with a whole bunch of others, and check them out. As always, check the show notes if you want to connect with us online for X/Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Come by. Yeah. Tell us what you think. We'd love your feedback, and we enjoy going over all these things, playing all these different TTRPG systems. But with that, I think we're going to end it. So from our table to yours, thanks for joining the RPG Rundown.
And until next time, may your rolls be epic and your stories legendary.